morning, everybody. My name is Alex Barthet. Today we have a webinar on mid-year collection and credit tune-up, and then I'm going to talk about 3 pro tips that will help you improve your collections in 2019. Again, my name is Alex Barthet. I'm a board-certified construction lawyer here in South Florida. So let's get started. So today's agenda is a few bullet points here. We're going to talk about shoring up the basics, how to improve your collections generally. We'll talk about ways to protect your interests by collateralizing or securitizing those interests, and some of the things that are available to you to do that. We'll then talk about some ways that you can actually improve your collection techniques. How, once the debt is accrued, how can you improve the way you collect the debt? And then we'll answer any questions that you may have. To ask any questions, go to the GoToWebinar chat box. Make sure that when you ask any questions that you do not include any names of people or companies in your question, please. So let's get started. So let's go over the basics. And some of this may seem obvious, but there are still clients that come to my office and they don't have the basics nailed down. So number one, get it in writing. Your agreement ideally should be in writing, whether that's a proposal, an estimate, some type of credit application. Some type of agreement is always better than no agreement at all. With one exception, and that is whether it's your terms of the agreement or the other side's terms of the agreement. So you need to read and understand any agreement that you are asked to sign. So even if you are in the usual situation of people signing your agreement, just be aware that there are situations in which that may not always be the case. For example, purchase orders. So you have a customer sign your agreement or a credit application, but when they submit an order to you, they submit it with a purchase order that has terms and conditions. By the way, those terms and conditions may be referenced on a website. We see that more and more these days. So when you fill the purchase order, somewhere on the purchase order document, it says, and you agreed to be bound by the terms and conditions found at www. And then it takes you to a website. Have you read those terms and conditions? Do you understand what they mean? If you're going to object to them, you need to object to them before you fill the purchase order. Those are some of the things to keep in mind as you review the documents that make up your agreement. Some other specific items. What are the payment terms? Is there a right to collect interest and collection costs like legal fees? In Florida, you need, if you want to collect your legal fees based on a written agreement, it has to say that the prevailing party is entitled to recover their legal fees. That has to be a specific term in the written agreement. What is your warranty obligation? What are the indemnity obligations? If you're providing materials or labor to a site, have you defined how you're going to get access? When you need to be done by, or when do you start the deliveries? All of those should be terms and conditions that are addressed in your agreement. If not, it's left open to interpretation and therefore subject to dispute. So the more you can define in your agreement, the better off you are, so that it avoids confusion. The next thing you should do is you should audit your existing old accounts and get new agreements signed as applicable. So for example, if you're a plumbing supply house and you've been in business for many years, you may have customers that had no agreement at all, or had an old version of your agreement that has now been modified several times. You should go back through your files and determine, do these folks still have an agreement? Is it the new agreement? Is it an old agreement? How can I get my existing customer that's been a customer for a long time to sign my new terms and conditions? We also see this in the contractor-subcontractor realm, where you may have what's called a master agreement, right? So you may have your subcontractors or sub-subcontractors sign a master agreement, one agreement, and then you issue them purchase orders or work orders that reference that. Has that document changed over time? Are they bound by the old master agreement or an updated master agreement? You need to go through the exercise of determining that so that you can update your records and make sure everyone's dealing with the same agreement. So let's go through some other issues here. You should cap the credit that you provide. You need to limit your liability and exposure by limiting the credit you give. If you can, and if you're in a supply house, for example, you almost always can. As a subcontractor, it's harder, but you should actually cut off your customers. When their outstanding balance gets high enough, you should be able to say to them, I can't sell you any more or deliver any more product until you reduce the balance on your account. Because if things go bad, it's better to be owed $10,000 instead of $50,000. Always extend additional credit very carefully because your customer will take as much credit as you are willing to give them. Billing is a very important component part of collection. If you don't bill for it, you will not collect it. So no bill equals no payment. So your customer should be able to set their watch by how regularly you bill. If you are a rental company or service provider or supply house, you should be billing very, very regularly so that there's no misunderstanding about the fact that they have a bill and an amount to due. With respect to subcontractors and contractors, to the extent you submit pay requests, make sure you get your pay requests in time. Many contracts say that if you miss the pay request date, whether that's the 25th of the month or the 20th of the month, that you're not entitled to payment for that month. You have to roll it over to the next month. That's very expensive because now you're carrying that debt even longer. So billing timely is absolutely critical. The other thing to do is if you have a billing dispute, maybe it's an unapproved change order, maybe it's some disputed item on a bill. When an issue comes in front of a court, one of the things that they will consider is if the amount that you're claiming is due has ever been billed. Because if it hasn't been billed, most courts are going to assume then it wasn't due, right? If you haven't asked for it, then why are you asking for it now if you didn't ask for it at the time that the project was ongoing? So I understand the problem of not being able to bill for, as an example, change orders until they're approved. But at some point, you need to get to a place where you submit a bill for your unapproved or unfully approved change orders, because if you have to go to court, it's not going to look great that you haven't even billed for it yet. And the excuse that you haven't billed for it because it wasn't approved only makes things worse, right? Because then the judge is going to say, well, if it wasn't approved, then why are you even asking for it now? So billing for disputed items at the right time is critical to support a future legal case that you may have. Next, you always, always, always need to secure your payment with whatever is available to you to secure your payment. So let's run through a few of the options that you have. A personal guarantee. A personal guarantee is a written agreement signed by an individual that says that to the extent that the customer doesn't make the payment, that they will stand in the place of that customer to make good on the debt. It's a pretty simple agreement, but that also provides some additional security to you. Obviously, that this is most common in the supplier and rental company realm, but as a subcontractor or sub-subcontractor, it's not out of the realm of possibilities that you could still ask for a personal guarantee or what's called a corporate guarantee, a guarantee from another entity to support the debt that or the credit that you're extending. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Joint check agreements. This is another way that you can secure your right to be paid. A joint check agreement is an agreement between typically the two parties above you. So if you're a sub, it would be between the owner and the contractor. If you're a sub or a supplier, it may be between the contractor and the subcontractor. That's the more common place where you see it. And it's an agreement that says if or when payment is due from the contractor to the sub, the contractor is going to issue a joint check, a check jointly payable to you as a sub or you as a supplier to the sub and the sub, so that you can be certain that you get paid. Now, the reason you need to be careful about joint check agreements is they are agreements governed by their own terms. So even though the title may be joint check agreement, you need to read it and understand, because I have seen many joint check agreements that are not worth the paper they're printed on, because they give you as a sub or a rental company or a supply house very little right to enforce that agreement. So one of the things to consider is that if you are presented with a joint check agreement, that you have a lawyer review it to make sure that it protects you if you're the recipient of the joint check agreement. And even if you are just a participant in the joint check agreement, maybe you're the sub where this joint check agreement is moving through, that you have a lawyer review it. I would also suggest that if this is something that you either have done or plan to do in the future on a regular basis, that you hire a lawyer to draft your own joint check agreement. So when the issue comes up and you are, for example, a supply house, you can say, here's my joint check agreement. This is the one we need to sign. So you start with your agreement versus reviewing their agreement. Obviously, in construction in Florida, you have lien and bond rights depending on the job. So let's briefly run through the time frames associated with each of these. As you probably know, within 45 days of your first work on the job, no later than 45 days, you need to timely serve a notice to owner in order to perfect your lien rights as a sub, or supplier on a project. That also includes if you have a claim on a bond. It's technically not called the notice to owner, it's called the notice to contractor, but the rule is generally the same. No later than 90 days from your last work on the job, you need to record a claim of lien. That's for private jobs that are not bonded, or serve a notice of non-payment. That's for public jobs or private jobs that are bonded. And that notice of non-payment needs to be served no later than 90 days from your last work. Remembering, of course, that these dates are the outside deadlines. You can do them before, so you can serve your notice to owner on day 7. And we strongly recommend that you not wait until the end of these timeframes. Also, with respect to the claim of lien and notice of non-payment, you don't have to wait until the 90th day. You can record your lien while you're still working on the project. We've done that for clients who have disputes. They can't stop working. They don't want to stop working, but they want to exert a little leverage on the owner or the contractor. So they serve a notice of non-payment or record a claim of lien as they are working on the job to make sure that they get the attention of the people at the top that they are owed money on this job. And then finally, 1 year from your last work for bond claims and 1 year from the recording date of the claim of lien for lien claims, you have to file a lawsuit to foreclose or sue the surety. That is the outside deadline. Again, you don't have to wait a year. You can file that lawsuit 2 days after you record your claim of lien, or 3 weeks after you serve your notice of non-payment. And as I'll talk about later, waiting is almost always a bad idea. You should move first and not wait until it's too late. So I as the title of this presentation says, that I have 3 pro tips for you. So here's pro tip number 1. Consider negotiating a guarantee as you extend more credit. So maybe you don't have a personal guarantee on the account. One of the things you could do is you could say, look, your account is capped at $25,000. I can give you $40,000 worth of maximum credit on your account, but I need a personal guarantee. And if you catch your customer at the right opportunity where they really need that credit, they may sign a personal guarantee. And if written correctly, it will cover not just this additional piece, but it'll cover the old debt, going back effectively to the beginning, and all the credit that you extend in the future. So while they may not have signed a personal guarantee when they open the account, they may agree to sign a guarantee now, which will cover the entire account in the past and in the future. So consider that as an option as you talk to your customers. I gave you several deadlines that are associated with the lien and notice to owner. So we have an app in the App Store. If you search the lien zone in the App Store, you can get our CalcuLien app, and it will help you calculate the notice to owner and lien and bond deadline, so you don't have to count on your fingers anymore. Remembering, of course, that as I told you, 90 days, which is the lien and bond deadline, is not 3 months, right? There are some months with fewer than 30 days, some months with more than 30 days. So this app will calculate all of the necessary deadlines for you. So let's talk about ways to improve your collections. Number 1, start now. We are in the middle of the year of 2019. Your efforts today and over the next month or so are going to materialize as improved collections by the end of the year. You know, we see many clients wait until October, November before they really make a push to collect outstanding receivables before the end of their the calendar year, which is almost always the end of folks' fiscal year. Not always, but most of the time. I'm suggesting to you that you don't wait that long. Start now. I guarantee you that if you looked at your books, you have a handful of folks that owe you money from the end of last year and the beginning of this year. Start now at chipping away at that debt so that you can make an improvement in your final 2019 collections. So let's talk about how to do that. You want to contact delinquent account holders often. Do the obvious. Email, writing, text messages. Do it often, do it nicely, do it firmly, but you need to do it. You need to be on top of them all the time so that they know that you know that this debt is outstanding. Consider an in-person visit. We've had some clients have some success with this, right? So you just show up at their office and say, I'm here, I need to pick up a check. That type of confrontation sometimes works so that you can start to chip away at the balance that's owed to you. Collections is like the expression that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. The more persistent you are, the more likely it is that you're gonna collect the debt. Don't take any excuses. Obviously, they're paying somebody, right? Someone's getting paid. Maybe they're making their car payment, they're paying rent, they're paying their cell phone, they're paying their internet bill. So there is likely some revenue. You need to be persistent enough so that they decide to start paying you instead of those other bills, or in addition to those other bills, and possibly not pay other people, but you're the one that gets paid. Offer payment options to reduce the debt. So let's talk about a few of them. Methods of payment. You may not want to accept credit cards because of the fee, but you should, because it's better to get 97% of the debt and pay the 3% fee than none of it. So offer different ways that they can pay you and be set up to accept them. Offer payment terms. Okay, you're going to pay me $1,000 a week for the next 10 weeks. Accept partial payments. So they say, I can't pay you the $20,000 that I owe you. I only have $5,000. Fine, I'll take the $5,000. Okay, and then we'll talk about the rest in a couple of weeks. Don't turn away partial payments, because that may be money that you will never have the opportunity to get again. Making sure, of course, that you don't give a release for that partial payment in excess of the amount of money that you're getting. So, for example, if someone's paying you $5,000, make sure that the release has a through date or is somehow capped to the $5,000, that you're not giving up more rights than that. And then also consider getting some additional security. They can't pay you now, but you know, you can take a UCC on their inventory, or they have this other related entity and they'll give you a guarantee. So consider other security as a way to securitize your debt. You know, maybe they have a piece of equipment they're not using, and they'll deed it over to you and let you have possession of it until the debt is paid. So pro tip number 2, offer a written promissory note to wrap up all of the old debt into a payment plan. So I was walking into my building yesterday, and I was approached by a client who happens to do work in my office building here. He's an electrician, and he said that he's owed a lot of money, several $100,000 from a contractor over several years, that the contractor just hasn't been able to pay him. And I proposed to him, why don't you get him to sign a promissory note? And that promissory note may be not just from the company, but from the company and its principal over an agreed payment plan. And the reason that a promissory note is something you should consider for delinquent debts is because if you have to sue someone because they owe you money for materials or services that you rendered, it gives them the opportunity to defend that case, if they decide to, that I never got it on time. The materials were no good. I had to supplement your forces with other people. None of which may be true, but are things you'll have to deal with in a legal case. If someone signs signs a note, a promissory note, all of those defenses go away. The only defense is I paid you, and if they didn't pay you, they're not going to be able to prove that they did. It truly simplifies your legal case. So consider offering to people that owe you money that, okay, fine, let's set up a payment plan, and I'll present you with a promissory note. You'll pay this $20,000 debt at $1,000 a week for 20 weeks, and you'll sign this note, and you'll sign it individually, and we're good to go. So consider that as an option. Resolve disputes quickly and in writing. Maybe it wasn't your best day. Maybe things arrived late, they were damaged. Try to resolve these issues quickly and in writing so that you can move forward. It is always better to give a small credit in exchange for a prompt payment and move on. But here's pro tip number 3. Always expressly condition, in writing, email, or text, the reduction of the payment, the reduction based on a payment by a date certain, not a blanket credit memo. So let's assume that I owe you $20,000 and I'm unhappy with some of the materials, and we agree that instead of paying you 20, I'm going to pay you 17. So one way you can handle this is you send me a credit memo on the account for $3,000, and it just says credit memo $3,000. So now, if I don't pay you the 17 and you come and you have to sue me, you're going to say, well, I want to sue for the 20, but you can't because you gave a blanket credit memo for that $3,000. You didn't condition the credit on payment by a date certain. So that's not what you want to do. What you want to do is you want to say, fine, and you can send it. It can be as simple as an email. Thanks for taking the time to speak to me. I'm sorry that you were unhappy with the service that we rendered. We have agreed that that the debt of $20,000 will be reduced to $17,000 so long as you make payment in full of the $17,000 by July 1st, 2019. Ideally, they confirm, and now you have an agreement that if you have to go to court and you sue, you can sue for the 20 because you didn't get paid the 17 by July 1st. So you always want to condition a discount on payment by a date certain and do it in writing. Avoid emotional decision making. That is probably one of the worst things that you can do in your collection process. Leave your emotions at the door. This is a business. Make business decisions, and don't be driven emotionally to avoid taking a credit because you're right and they're wrong, so therefore I'm not going to give them any credit. You know, paying legal fees is very expensive to pursue a claim, and trust me when I tell you that after paying legal fees for 1, 2, 3, 5, 7 months, you're going to forget about the emotion about you wanting to be right after you pay several thousands or tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees when you could have taken a small discount and resolved the whole thing and moved on and done things more productively in your business than deal with this debt. So I have a bonus pro tip for you, and that is always be careful when the other side tells you, I'll give you the next job if you give me a credit or you wipe away this debt. If you're even going to consider that as an option, make sure that you have a fail-safe in some type of written agreement so that if you don't get the job, they still owe you the money. Or if they get the job and it's not at your price, you still get the money or some portion of the money. There's lots of things that can go wrong in the, just zero out the account and I'll give you the next job, that you need to make sure that you document it well so that you don't get, so that you don't have to not get paid and not get the job, or get a job that doesn't really work for you. Finally, don't delay in initiating the legal process. The sooner that you start proceeding, the better off you are. Every day that goes by makes it that much harder to collect a debt. People leave companies, memories fade, computer systems crash and documents and emails disappear. The longer you wait, the harder it is. And you do not want to be the last person in line collecting a debt from somebody when there's nothing left to get. You want to be the first in line, because the first in line almost always gets more than the guy or gal that's last in line. So if you have any questions, go ahead and submit them now. Let me see if there are any. We don't have any questions yet. Let me tell you about our next upcoming webinar and seminar. So on October 22nd in Broward in Fort Lauderdale, we have a 3-hour deep dive into liens, bonds, and contract provisions on how to get paid. It's a very thorough presentation. We go through the lien law, the bond law, specific contract provisions to include in your contract, to avoid in your contract. We answer lots of questions. It's a very well-received seminar. As you know, we do these webinars every month. They're free. The next one is July 18th from 9 to 9:20, and it's titled Pay When Paid Sucks. So do this to get paid anyways. We'll talk about what is a pay when paid provision, how it works, how to avoid them, how to modify them, and some other safeguards, even when you have to live with a pay when paid, so you can still mitigate your risk on a project. If you have any questions, you can always send me an email. It's alex@barthet.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, where we post construction fail pictures every day, as well as upcoming projects and other information about construction law, and that's at the Lien Zone on any of those platforms. I want to thank everyone for taking the time today to participate. Again, even if you have questions later today or this week, just send me an email. Thanks, and everyone have a great day.